Hello and welcome to Chat Over Metaphysics. I'm Brenda Michelle, your host, and we will be talking about all things metaphysics on this channel. I am a healer, a medium, a metaphysician, a psychic, I'm an empath, and I've been a spiritualist for many years. And so on this particular episode, we will talk about what exactly metaphysics is. The mission statement for this podcast is to provide our viewers with information and tools to find and live in their own truth. All are one race, the human race. We provide info from a standpoint that draws from the life and belief systems of ancient cultures, science, and religion. We don't debate, we just provide information and discuss ideas. If you're not willing to open your mind, this is not the podcast for you. As a seeker of truth, I have looked many places to find all the information that I know today. And while I'm not a teacher, I'm just a person providing information. Over the years, I've found out some pretty interesting things. I've seen things that can't be explained. I've experienced some of these things with other people, so it wasn't just me who experienced it. And so on this podcast, we're going to talk about all of those things and shed some light on what it really is, to recognize it as a part of natural life. So, what is metaphysics? The definition of metaphysics as it appears in the Merriam-Webster dictionary is the branch of philosophy that deals with the first principles of things, including abstract concepts such as being, knowing, substance, cause, identity, time, and space. Andronicus of Rhodes, the 1st century BCE head of Aristotle's Perraitic school, said this about metaphysics. Metaphysics has signified many things in the history of philosophy, but it has not strayed far from a literal meaning of beyond the physical. Beyond the physical is the way we will define it on this show. Anything that is beyond the physical. In our day-to-day world, a lot of us experience things that we can't explain. Some choose to ignore it, and some choose to find out more information. It was before the Industrial Revolution that we used to ponder on the thought of what is the true meaning of life. Once the Industrial Revolution came into play, we did more thinking about things or acquiring things. However, now we're getting back to the point of where we're going back to our original question: what is the meaning of life? And as strange as some of the things may seem that people have experienced in life, there is explanations for it, and there are valid explanations for it. It is mystical, or what you would consider mystical. It is something beyond the physical. However, science has made great strides over the years, and they can prove and define things in ways that they haven't been able to do before. So understand that whatever it is that you've been experiencing in life, that you have no idea where it comes from, understand that it can be defined and it can be understood. I used to work with a woman who would see colors around people, but because she didn't know if it was good or bad, evil, she chose to ignore it. And it was a part of her. So if you're experiencing anything like that, you need to explore it more to see what it is. I was in my early 20s when someone first told me that I had healing energy coming out of my hands. But as time went on, I found the necessary tools or the necessary resources to figure out what it is that I could do with the healing energy that was coming out of my hands. And so it had a lot to do with spiritualism. That's where I seeked out my answers first, because I had been a spiritualist since I was 10 years old. In spiritualism, they do practice developing the gifts of the spirit. And so Then what I started to do was take classes on laying on of hands. A lot of people may say, well, if it's a gift, why do you need to develop it? If God gave you this gift, you should not have to develop it. It should just be there. But the thing is, if you have a gift, sometimes you do need to understand how it works. When you're a child at Christmas and someone gives you a toy that needs to be assembled, you have to know how to, or you have to get someone to assemble it for you. You may not know how to assemble it yourself, but it was a gift that you could use. So what I would like to do is help people to understand that all of the things that they know to be somewhat supernatural is very natural. It's just beyond the physical. They never tell us about the beyond the physical part. Most people have many questions about death and dying, and does life go on? And even though some people have religion that will tell them that life goes on after death, they have stipulations on it. What we want to do is understand more about our existence. What is the meaning of life? Why are we here? How do we become more of ourselves? And what does that mean? So our first topic on our first episode of this podcast, we will be talking about spiritualism. I chose spiritualism because I grew up in spiritualism, but we also will talk about all different types of spirituality, different things that different cultures practice, especially Africa, because all civilization comes from Africa. All of us come from Africa. Whether we want to agree with that or not, that's another story. However, all civilization and all human beings originated in Africa. So our first topic on this episode will be about spiritualism, the belief system of spiritualism. We're going to also talk about the phenomena of spiritualism, which consists of prophecy, clairvoyance, clairaudience, gift of tongues, laying on of hands, healing, visions, trance, apports, levitation, raps, automatic and independent writings and paintings, voice, materialization, photography, psychometry, and any other manifestation proving the continuity of life as demonstrated through the physical and spiritual senses and faculties of man. The Nationalist Spiritualist Association of Churches defines spiritualism as the science, philosophy, and religion of continuous life based upon the demonstrated fact of communication by means of mediumship with those who live in the spirit world. So what is a medium? Well, basically a medium stands between this world and the next, and you give messages from dearly departed loved ones to their family members and friends that are in the living. Right before spiritualism started in America, there was a gentleman by the name of Anton Mesmer. He was from Germany, and he's where we get the term mesmerized from. He also did a lot of research on the human body, and really what he was doing was laying on of hands. He did research on the human body. They called him a fraud because he couldn't prove some of the things that he claimed that he was doing for people. However, the clients that he had never stopped coming to him because he actually was helping them. He said that there was an energetic fluid that ran through people, and when it was imbalanced, people would become sick. In 1848, spiritualism started with these three sisters, the Fox sisters. Basically, what happened, they were in Hydesville, New York, upstate New York, and they began to hear rapping and tapping in the home that they had just moved into. At the time, they were young teenage women. They would hear this rapping, and then they finally realized that they could communicate with the thing that was making the noise. Come to find out, they realized that it was a peddler who died, and his remains were on the premises of the house. Leah, Margaret, and Kate Fox, I must say, also had other people in their family who had spiritual gifts that they had already developed and was using. So it was almost like a family trait for them. What happened is that after they heard the rapping and they were able to communicate with this spirit in the home, they proved it. People would come far and wide and try to figure out what was going on. And what happened is that Leah started to do seances at home while Margaret and Kate toured America doing seances and mediumship work all across the country. They continued to tour the country until one day Margaret got married. Her husband at the time was Catholic. He didn't necessarily believe in spiritualism, so she denounced spiritualism and said it was all a fraud, they made everything up, and she converted to Catholicism like her husband. Shortly after that, Kate also got married, and she also denounced spiritualism, and she converted to the religion of her husband. While Leah was at home, she met a spiritualist at one of the seances that she performed, and she married that spiritualist, and they became wealthy. However, Margaret and Kate, both of their husbands died at different times, and once Margaret's husband died, because he died first, she became an alcoholic. Kate also, once her husband died, she also became an alcoholic. And what happened next is that they both went back into spiritualism, and they tried to tour the country again. But they weren't as successful, and it wasn't as lucrative as it was before. So both sisters were financially destitute for the most part. Eventually they died, they succumbed to alcoholism. Leah, however, did not die of alcoholism, and she died shortly after Margaret and Kate. They spearheaded the spiritualist movement back in 1848. Spiritualism as a religion, however, was formed in September 1st, 1893. During the heyday of spiritualism, there were a lot of famous mediums, and one of those mediums was Victoria Claflin Woodall. She was the first woman to run for president, and she was a leader of the women's suffrage movement. During the time of spiritualism, there was a lot of things going on in America, like the Civil War, women's rights, and things that pertain to people becoming more independent or rebelling against the patriarchy. So spiritualism was very attractive to a lot of different people because it gave them hope in ways that they didn't have before. And because of the war, there was a lot of people dying, and a lot of people wanted to have that hope to be able to contact their dearly departed loved ones who perished in the war. Edgar Cayce was not known as a spiritualist. However, he had a gift. He had a unique gift where he would go into trance and he would channel an entity who would give remedies to people who were sick. And these remedies were basically things that were household items, different herbs, supplements, and different unconventional things that we used to be able to get at the mom and pop pharmacies across the country. A lot of the substances that Edgar Cayce prescribed for people you can get today at the Edgar Cayce Foundation. In his lifetime, Edgar Cayce helped thousands of people to live better lives and to heal from various different ailments. In spiritualism, it was very popular to have spiritualist camps, and there are many camps across the country. Most of the spiritualist camps that are still in existence today are well over 100 years old. Camp Lilydale is one of the most famous spiritualist camps in America. There is also another spiritualist camp called Chesterfield in Chesterfield, Indiana. That's the place where they train a lot of mediums. As a matter of fact, Camp Chesterfield is the most sought after mediumship school in America. These are pictures that I have of Camp Chesterfield. I used to go down there quite often with my mother, and It looks the same as it always has for over, I believe they are celebrating their 135th anniversary this year. And this is the sign that you will see when you first enter the campgrounds. This is the street view of Camp Chesterfield when you first enter the campgrounds. On campus, there are a lot of homes. They have a lot of resident psychics and mediums that live on campus. This is a picture of a statue of Osiris that's on campus. It's a part of a memorial in honor of the leaders of the various different religions. It's called the Trail of Religions, and Osiris is there, Zoroaster's there, Zeus is there, Jesus is there, Buddha's there, and many others. I just so happen to take a picture of Osiris because I've always had an affinity. I've felt close to Egypt in all things Egypt. And I have to tell you this story. So when I became a certified healing touch practitioner, I wanted to put my hands on everything and see what type of sensations I could feel. So when I came across Osiris and the Trail of Religions, I put my hands on every bust in that monument. I put my hands on Zeus, I put my hands on Zoroaster, Buddha, and when I got to Osiris, it was really buzzing. The bust was really vibrating really strongly. And I said, "Whoa, Ma, you gotta come feel this." And so she came over and she put her hands on Osiris. She could feel the vibration, but it was very faint for her. So Mom started to walk around and she put her hands on the various different statues. And so by the time she got to Jesus, it was buzzing. That statue for her was buzzing just like Osiris was buzzing for me. And she said, "Oh my goodness, Brenda, you need to come touch this one. This one is really buzzing." So I put my hands on Jesus and I felt the vibration, but it was very faint for me, just like Osiris was very faint for my mother. And come to find out later on, a reader told us both that, okay, you have close ties to Egyptian spirituality and your mom has close ties to Christianity. Now, we didn't tell her about our experience, but she told us that in particular. There's also a fountain on Camp Chesterfield grounds, and it has a statue of Kuan Yin at the top. Kuan Yin is a spiritual figure from China. She's a healer. That's why they have a statue of Kuan Yin on campus. At the time when I was there, a lot of things were under construction because the whole campus is very old. Like I said, it's 135 years old. So this fountain wasn't working at the time when I took this picture. Also, this area is called the toadstools. And what they used to have there was wood backs and wood seats on each chair. Most of the time when you go to Camp Chesterfield or any spiritualist camp, it will be rare to see a spiritualist use cards for readings. However, they do. Most of the time it's mediumship, it's channeling, it's psychic readings, and they don't use. Oftentimes when you go to visit a spiritualist camp, you'll get a reading or sign up for readings from psychics or mediums or channelers, and sometimes they have billet readings in the chapel because there's a chapel on campus. They'll have church service. They'll have a special message service from time to time. They'll have, sometimes you can even go to a seance on campus. This is a statue that was built in honor of the Native Americans in America. In spiritualism, it is traditional to have a spirit guide that's an Indian chief. I was told a long time ago from my spiritualist pastor that there was a time when Native Americans wouldn't come through for white people because of the fact of what happened here in America and the fact that their land was taken and all the things that they had to endure here in America. But eventually they started to come through for white people. I want to tell you a story about this picture. Oftentimes a lot of people will go to a spiritualist camp at night and go around snooping around the campgrounds and taking pictures, and that's all well and good because a lot of times you spend the night on campus. A man back in the 50s actually took a picture of this particular monument, and right at the bottom of the monument was the spirit of a Native American chief in full regalia standing there, and he was able to get this on film. This is the Sunflower Hotel. This hotel has been on campus since the inception of Camp Chesterfield. There was another hotel across the little street from this particular hotel, but it burned down years ago. As you can see with this picture, the hotel looked pretty good and they were still using it at this time. Right now, I do believe they have it closed for remodeling to refurbish and rebuild and preserve it. There have been people who've been trying to debunk spiritualism and the things that were going on. But mainly that's because when spiritualism first started, there were a lot of mediums that were doing exactly what they said they were doing. But then there was a lot of scammers that also were doing different things, and they were not doing what they said they were doing. So there's a lot of people that, come from different schools of thought and think that they're doing illusions like magicians, and that is not true. If you've ever been to a spiritualist camp, you already know that there's a lot of little things that happen that you can't explain that happens. My mom and I went to the cafeteria to eat, and we put 3 utensils on our tray: a knife, a fork, and a spoon. By the time we got our food and by the time we sat down, we only had a knife and a spoon. The fork was missing for both of us. And so we talked about it, and we just kind of like, oh my goodness, where did the fork go? We both know we put one on our tray. So that's just an example of some of the weird things that you can experience on campus. Also, while I was walking through the little wooded area at Camp Chesterfield, I could have sworn I saw some fairies. Sorry. I had never seen a fairy before, but something just told me that it was a fairy. I was shocked. My spiritualist pastor always told me, if you ever got a chance, you need to go to Camp Chesterfield. Because of the ending of slavery in 1865, a lot of African Americans gravitated towards spiritualism. A lot of people don't know the history of African Americans and spiritualism, and there were a lot of African American spiritualists. Most of the time, African American spiritualists were of other faiths as well, as was a lot of the other spiritualists. They would mix spiritualism with Pentecostal belief systems, with Protestant belief systems, Quaker belief systems. African Americans were using hoodoo and voodoo along with spiritualism. This gentleman is named Father George William Hurley. Father Hurley was born February 17, 1884, and he died June 23, 1943. He was the founder of the Universal Hagar Spiritual Church Association. He was raised Baptist by his mother, Tina Hurley. When he was 7, he began to preach and challenged the traditional Baptist doctrine. He was ordained at the age of 11. After high school, he went to Tuskegee Institute and Phelps Bible Hall Training School to receive ministerial training from Dr. E.J. Penney. In 1918 to 1919, Reverend Hurley met Father Elias D. Smith, founder of the Triumph, the Church, and Kingdom of God in Christ. Hurley was moved by Father Smith and his teachings and consequently joined. After several years, he reached the level of elder and the presiding Prince of Michigan, but became dissatisfied with the teachings of the Triumph Church. After this, he briefly joined the International Spiritual Church, but again, he was not completely content. However, he did learn mediumship while he was with the International Spiritual Church. On September 23, 1923, he founded the Universal Hagar Spiritual Association. Father Hurley was concerned with both racial and economic disparities. I wanted to talk about Father Hurley for a minute because even though technically he wasn't a spiritualist, he did have a mediumship school where he taught hundreds of women, African American women, mediumship. And he also founded the Knights of the All-Seeing Eye, which was also an extension to the church. Also, as Father Hurley developed new congregations, he also had schools attached to those congregations, mediumship schools. Sojourner Truth became fascinated by spiritualism around 1856 when she was invited by a radical Quaker sect, the Friends of Human Progress, to give a speech on abolition in Battle Creek, Michigan. Within a year, Truth moved to Michigan, purchasing a home in the nearby village of Harmonia, and joined the Battle Creek Spiritualist community of 1867. This is Harriet E. Wilson. She was born in Milford, New Hampshire. She was the first African American woman to publish a full novel. The title of the novel was Our Nig, Sketches from the Life of a Free Black. Harriet was a spiritualist, and she joined the Massachusetts Spiritualist Association in 1867, where she attended conventions and shared the podium with Andrew Jackson Davis, who was also a very famous spiritualist and medium. In 1867, Harriet was listed in the Boston Spiritualist newspaper Banner of Light as the eloquent and earnest colored trance medium. Her interests included labor reform and educating children in spiritualist doctrine. At the Great Spiritualist Camp meeting in Pierpont Grove, Massachusetts, she delivered an address to an estimated 3,000 people. By 1900, Harriet had retired as a medium, and in June of that year, she died in Quincy, Massachusetts. Mother Leafy Anderson was born in Wisconsin in 1887 in the 19th century. She was a spiritualist, and her mediumship included contact with the spirit of the Native American war chief Black Hawk, who had lived in Illinois and Wisconsin, Anderson's home state. Mother Anderson was the founder of the spiritual church movement in New Orleans, Louisiana in the 1920s, a confederation of churches largely based in the African American community. The church she founded in New Orleans featured traditional spirit guides in worship services with a mixture of Protestant and Catholic Christian iconography, as well as special services and hymns that honored the spirit of the Sauk leader Black Hawk. After Anderson's death, her successor, Mother Catherine Seals, then led the church, the Temple of the Innocent Blood, until her death, at which point it fractured, giving rise to a multiplicity of spiritualist denominations in New Orleans and elsewhere. These denominations, along with a number of similar but independent spiritualist churches across America, are known today as the Spiritual Church Movement. Mother Anderson died of flu in 1927. Her last words reportedly were, "I am going away, and I am coming back, but you shall know that I am here." Mother Catherine Seals was born Nanny Cohens in Kentucky in 1887, and she moved to New Orleans in her mid-teens, working as a laundress. She suffered a paralytic stroke at the hands of her third husband, and after being denied treatment by a white faith healer because she was black, Mother Catherine vowed to start her own fellowship, one that would not discriminate based on race. Soon after that, Mother Catherine believed she received a vision from God, and this vision told her that she could heal herself, and she did just that. And after that, she began using her newfound powers on others. In New Orleans, she led the Temple of Innocent Blood. She soon moved her church to the lower Ninth Ward, encouraging her converts to buy lots around her. There, she conducted an active healing practice, while her church became a safe haven for unwed mothers, abused women, and orphans, the Innocent Blood, for which she named her temple. Now, Mother Seals was into giving you the full come to Jesus experience. They say that she was lowered into the church from a hole in the ceiling to make it seem like she came from the heavens in order to come down and preach the word. She did a lot of healings using traditional stuff from African spiritual belief systems. And she also, like Mother Leafy, had a jazz band playing at the church services. As a matter of fact, Mother Catherine played trombone. She was basically trained by Leafy Anderson in mediumship, but her and Mother Leafy didn't always get along. As you can see, Mother Catherine liked to wear a lot of flamboyant outfits. As you can see, it's probably Black Jesus on Mother Catherine's robe, but that's the way that she performed or did her church. Basically, she had all types of people who were, I guess, the throwaways, or what you would call the throwaways of society, and she took them in and took care of them. And so there was a lot of controversy surrounding her church because she would oftentimes make white people that would come to the church sit in the back, and the innocent bloods were the saints, and they could sit in the front. And so that caused a lot of issues, and they tried to shut her down, and they tried to do a lot of different things. So Mother Catherine Seals became sick eventually, and she moved back to Kentucky. She said, "My time is up." And so she went back to Kentucky, and that's where she died. And after she passed away, they shipped her body back to New Orleans to have a proper funeral. Thousands of people attended her funeral. Blacks, whites, all types of people. And that was very significant for the times. Mother Catherine Seals was very successful in bringing people of all different colors together to worship and to become healed at the same time in the same place. This is Lillian Cosby. Lillian Cosby was a very famous medium. However, she was not considered, or she did not consider herself, a spiritualist. Lillian Cosby gave readings to a lot of celebrities, including Yoko Ono, Diane Carroll, and many others. Lillian found out about her spiritual gifts as a child, when one day she wanted to stay home from school because she had a dream that she was going to get run over. Her mother sent her to school anyway, and she wound up getting run over by a truck. She gave a lecture at Temple University about developing your psychic ability, and she believed that mediumship was a development of the mind, and that it was not something that was considered, I won't say spiritual, but it was something that was natural. And if you developed your mind, you were able to do it. And Lillian Cosby traveled the world giving psychic readings to all different types of people. At the time, she had a lot of requests from the police department to help them with unsolved cases, murder cases. Lillian declined to work with the police force because of the fact that the energy was too overwhelming for her. She would pick up on the energies of the people who were related to the missing person, as well as the energy of the missing person as they were going through whatever they went through. So she never worked with the police department. Lillian Cosby died December 13, 2013 of complications of a stroke. She was 89. This is a picture of Rebecca Perrault. Rebecca Perrault was the partner of Rebecca Cox Jackson. They lived together for over 30 years. There is no known picture of Rebecca Cox Jackson, so I used Rebecca Perrault's picture in order to tell you about Rebecca Cox Jackson, because back when they were living, they both were called the two Rebeccas collectively. Rebecca Cox Jackson, a free black woman born in Pennsylvania in 1795, began seeing visions as a child and attributed her ability to read and write to the divine power of God. An influential Shaker and founder of her own Shaker community in Philadelphia, Jackson recounted her visions and mediumship in her autobiography, Gifts of Power. For all these years, I've been under the tuition of invisible spirits who communicate to me from day to day. By this means, I have been able to tell people's thoughts and to tell them words they've been spoken many miles distance from me, and also to tell them things they would do a year beforehand. Rebecca Cox Jackson used her abilities and influence to challenge institutional sexism and racism by cultivating spaces that centered Black women, including a seance circle in her own home. Jackson's ability to speak to the dead was an affirmation of both her devotion to God and her dedication to empowering her community. Rebecca Cox Jackson was a Shaker, and that's a religious group that was founded on the principles of celibacy, communal living, confession of sin, and most importantly, equality. The Shakers believed that all were equal in the eyes of God and allowed anyone to join their communities, provided that they turned over their property and all material wealth once they committed to communal life. The Shakers welcomed all races into their society, and when one of their own was in danger, they took measures to prevent their departure. Believers would often purchase the freedom of slaves in the southern communities. Paschal Beverly Randolph was born October 8th in 1825 in New York City. He was a spiritualist, occultist, transmedium, and author. His father was Edmund Randolph, and his mother's name was Flora Beverly. She was a Black woman who claimed descent from Madagascan royalty. Edmund Randolph was also the cousin of Thomas Jefferson. His mother died when he was very young, and his father abandoned him. By the age of 16, Paschal Beverly Randolph, he worked as a seaman, and so he traveled the world and he learned various different occult practices. He learned spiritualism here in America as well. Paschal Beverly Randolph thought that the spiritualists were doing mediumship basically in a non-empowering way that led them to sometimes the wrong outcomes. And so he developed his own way of mediumship called blending. Paschal Beverly Randolph also founded the Fraternitas Rosicrucian in 1858, the first and the oldest Rosicrucian organization in America. He also worked closely with Abraham Lincoln, who was also a Rosicrucian. During his short life, Paschal Beverly Randolph wrote several books on mediumship, various different occult practices, including sex magic. The Rosicrucian order that he founded, as well as the Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor, still practice Paschal Beverly Randolph's teachings till this day. All of the teachings except for the sex magic. Paschal Beverly Randolph died in Toledo, Ohio on July 29, 1875 at age 49. The cause of death was known to be suicide. However, R. Swinburne Clymer, a late Supreme Master of the Fraternitas, which was the Rosicrucian order, stated that years after Randolph's death, in a deathbed confession, a former friend of Randolph's had conceded that in a state of jealousy and temporary insanity, he killed Paschal. Paschal Beverly Randolph's death officially is recorded in Lucas County Probate Court as accidental. Spiritualism over the years has helped people in a way that other religions may not have been able to help them. For instance, with myself, I had a lot of my elders to die one after the other, and spiritualism helped me to be able to understand that there is life after death. I would have dreams, and all of the people that were closest to me that passed away would come to me in a dream to let me know that they were okay. And basically, spiritualism gave me the comfort of knowing that I will see them again and that we all meet up in the same place once we leave this earth realm. So this is the end of our podcast, Chat Over Metaphysics. If you enjoyed this podcast, please like and subscribe down below, and we'll let you know when we have the next one. Thanks for watching. See you next time.